Hello, everybody. It is wonderful to see you here. I'm so grateful for your presence and interest in being here. Following our main service and coffee hour, I hope you got a little French pastry or something downstairs if you were at coffee hour. I want to first give a word of thanks and welcome to those joining us online on our live webcast, and our AV team, Matt and Anthony, who are behind the scenes working to enable people to join us live on webcast, and also for you to, on this screen, see my hands and some of my feet at the organ console, since it's a little bit hidden there. So what I'm going to do is perform for you the program that I have planned and prepared to play in 1 week at the Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris. It will be at 4:00 p.m. there, which is 10 a.m. our time, Eastern time, so during the main service time here at Christ Church Cranbrook. And we're doing this here because the Notre-Dame Cathedral has a policy of not webcasting or recording organ recitals like this. So this is the chance for you to hear this program. I'm going to speak about each piece before I play it, especially since a lot of the music is modern repertoire, so very important to know things about the music. But before I speak about each piece and play it, I want to just give an overview of the program. It has never taken me so long, I think, to plan a program as this one, partly because there is so much music that I would love to play in that space. And also, there is such an incredible history of music in the cathedral, and I want to be mindful of that. So what I've done is, first of all, chosen music that matches that particular instrument and that acoustic, and also music that brings the United States and France together. As an American performer going to France to perform, I believe very strongly that music brings people together, and so I hope that this program will be a way of doing that and even uniting our two countries. If you've never been to the Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris, make sure you go when you can hear the organ. That is for most of their weekend services, such as Saturday night, Sunday morning, or Sunday evening. Hearing that organ in that acoustic is unlike anything I've ever heard in my life, anywhere. It is completely unique, and it is absolutely otherworldly. So when I was thinking about what music am I going to play, the very first thing that came to my mind immediately was the music by Olivier Messiaen, who is the very first composer on our program. His music really needs the power and the color of an organ like that, as well as a huge acoustic. So what I hope the program does is matches the organ and the acoustic well, and also bring people together and bring countries together. It is mostly modern music because that organ does that music really, really well. However, the cathedral was a center for development of music at several different points in history, including shortly after it was finished. It was such an important place for the development of music from about the mid-12th century to the mid-13th century that there's an entire school of music called the Notre-Dame School that music students study today when they study music history. And so that's an example of how that cathedral that we can go and visit today was a center for development in music that is in part how we got to where we are today with the kind of music that we enjoy today. So I didn't want to play only modern music. I wanted to do a kind of homage to the history of music in that cathedral and how it has developed. And so that is why we have a piece from the Baroque era with the selection by Nicolas de Grigny. We also have a lot of connections between the United States and France with the composers of the modern pieces that I'll explain. So now, let's talk about the very first piece, Olivier Messiaen. So I think that of all the music, these are the pieces that you really need to know the most about so you can put on the right kind of ears to listen to it. Olivier Messiaen is, I think, a completely unique composer. The things that he developed, the ideas he had that he wanted to create in music are unlike anybody, I think, that has ever walked on planet Earth. He is extraordinary. And he often writes pieces about a very specific concept, and yet he very firmly comes out of French Impressionism. So I think that a key to listening to Messiaen is that you can't listen too closely, except there's a very specific thing that he's writing about, and you need to be able to hear that. So how can we navigate those two things? So as you all probably know, if you view paintings by French Impressionistic composers, by French Impressionistic painters like Monet or Manet, you have to step back a certain bit from the painting. You can't look at it too close. The painter intends for you to have that kind of physical distance to view their painting. Well, this is how I think it is with Messiaen. However, we can't take our ears and just put them a few feet behind us, like we can move our bodies from a painting in an art gallery. So what I suggest is to think about this concept, this painting that Messiaen is trying to create for us. Think about that and let the music fill in the blanks behind the scenes, almost like it's background music in a way, even though he didn't intend for it to be background music. So the things that he's writing about in the pieces that I'm going to play are about the ascension of Christ. This is from the 1930s, a fairly early piece for him. We, however, here in the Detroit area, have a really special connection with this composer. His largest and greatest work for the organ, which was his solo instrument, was commissioned by us here in the Detroit area, by the Detroit chapter of the American Guild of Organists in the early 1980s. He had, from what I understand, stopped writing music. They were preparing for a big national convention of organists and wanted him to write a new piece. And from what I've been told, including people here who were part of it, they had to fly over to Paris and talk him into it. And he agreed. And they were expecting and had commissioned a piece. So something like 5, 6, 7 minutes in length to be premiered at this upcoming national convention. Well, Messiaen must have gotten really inspired or something like that, because what he gave them was an 18-movement, 2-hour-long organ work that is a synthesis of everything he developed throughout his entire life. So we here in the Detroit area can claim some credit for that. It was commissioned here, it was premiered on a church on Woodward Avenue. Messiaen was here in the summer of 1986 when it was premiered. And so we have a special connection with Messiaen in that way. This is an earlier piece, the Ascension Suite from the 1930s that I'll be playing. So you're hearing the third and fourth movements. The third movement has quite a long title. Transport de joie is how it's known for short. Messiaen is a very, very devout person of faith. He was Catholic, and he was very clear that he wrote music to express his faith. And he clearly was somebody who was very contemplative, very reflective. He was known to go to church frequently for Eucharist and to pray. And so what he is giving us in this Ascension Suite are, I think, fruits of his meditation on the ascension of Christ. None of this is typical things that one might write about the ascension of Christ. So this opening piece that we're doing is wanting to depict a soul that has finished its time on earth. It has followed in Christ's ascension to heaven and is in heaven. And it is so incredibly happy and joyful to be with God in heaven for all eternity that it is literally bouncing all over the place. And what Messiaen is trying to depict in music is the bouncing all over the place of that soul in heaven. Who on earth comes up with that concept and then says, I want to write a piece of music to depict that? Well, Messiah is who comes up with that, and there's so much more than this. So you will hear this bouncing around. It's a very extroverted piece, lots of stopping and starting. We do have two melodies that you'll hear, one at the very beginning in my hands, and then the second in the feet, and we go back and forth between those melodies until they are combined, and the whole piece has this huge crescendo. And in this piece, you will be able to hear how powerful the music of Messiah is. It's very, very emotional, and I think some of the most powerful music some of the powerful music ever written. That is his whole life's work, not just this piece. The second piece is the complete polar opposite. So here, Messiah is depicting Christ ascending. But it's not the triumphant, glorious kind of scene that we might expect and that many composers have given. Rather, Messiah is trying to capture the scene where Christ, the Son of God, is entering into very deep communion with the Father in heaven. And so the piece is this incredibly serene texture. You will hear very warm, lush sounds from the organ. And I personally view this piece as incredibly peaceful because Jesus didn't always have it easy in his earthly life. And maybe he was kind of relieved to actually be done with all the things on the earth, all the people out to get him, people not understanding him, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of those earthly difficulties are done, and now we are at peace. And we are becoming, we are entering heaven with God the Father. And so this deep spiritual communion, this prayer between the Son and the Father is what Messiah is trying to create in this piece. You'll hear that the music has a sense of floating, which again is very intentional. And I think overall, if we really zoom out on this prayer of Christ movement, there's this sense of awe that I think is so appropriate and so captivating. So here are our opening two movements of Messiah. Again, I encourage you to think about these concepts that Messiah is trying to paint for us, and let the music fill in the back. But for this first piece, you're going to have to fasten your seatbelts too. Isn't that incredible music? So one of the things you just heard was the harmonies that Messiaen used. They are unique to him. He developed his own way of writing harmony, and that's what gives the music a very unique sound, as well as a very French sound. We're now going to have a big gear shift and go back to the Baroque era with a set of versets by Nicolas de Grigny. He is not a famous composer in the music world. He died quite young. As you can see, he was 31 when he passed away, and in his late 20s, when he published a collection of organ pieces in 1699 that includes the pieces we will hear. I'm playing this because this is not just fabulous music from the French Baroque, but de Grigny is one of my favorite composers from the Baroque era because he really pushed the envelope of what is possible in composition. There's a lot of personality and character in his music and a lot of just being wild and out of control. And we will hear this in the last two movements. So what de Grigny wrote in this big book is a set of pieces for what organists of French cathedrals in the 17th and 18th century would use for services. And that is that they would often replace a few verses of a hymn or some parts of the Eucharist service, like the Gloria in Excelsis or the Agnus Dei, with a verse that was sung or played by the organist. This actually comes from generations before, even in the 16th century and before, where a choir, for example, would sing a choral setting of a verse, and then we go back to the original melody, and then the choir would sing another choral setting of the verse, and there's this alternation with the verses. So that is what we will hear now by de Grigny. Ave Maristella is a hymn that would have been sung at evening prayer or vespers for big feasts of the Blessed Virgin Mary. If you are at a French Catholic cathedral, you are going to do up Feasts of the Blessed Virgin Mary, because they really love that. And Ave Maristella was the hymn that was appointed almost like a lectionary reading. And so we will hear four different brief movements that would have been first the introduction of the hymn, and then following in alternation with sung verses. So at the very beginning, you will hear the standard way of introducing a hymn, which is a very grand, stately, majestic sound from the organ, and the melody of that hymn played in really long notes with my feet on a big kind of trumpet or trombone sound that's around the tenor range. It's lower in the texture, but not quite the bass line. After that, we won't hear the melody again, because again, people would have been singing it, so composers would take just a little bit of the melody and make a whole piece out of it. And that's what we will hear later with the fugue, and then the duo, and then the final movement. So the duo is just a little duet, one voice from my right hand, one voice from my left hand. It's very standard until we get to the end. And you'll hear lots of running around with scales being fast, and that is de Grigny going way off the chartered path of what we would expect from such a piece. The last movement is called the dialogue, or the dialogue, and sur le grand joug simply tells the organist what sounds to use. So you'll hear very fiery sounds from the organ that was a French organ specialty at the time and still is. You would not have heard those sounds anywhere else in the world except on organs in France. So enjoy that specialty. De Grigny makes this movement really, really dramatic, especially at the beginning. Again, lots of running scales all over the place. It's almost like the Jerry Springer show is going to Vespers at the cathedral, and during the hymn, we're having big fights or something. It's really, really dramatic, and I personally really love the drama and the character and the personality. In this last movement, there's a middle section, and that is the dialogue movement where the movement gets its title. So you'll hear me going back and forth on the lowest two keyboards, which you can see here in the camera. It's almost like the organ is dialoguing with itself. That's the idea. Now, French organs in de Grigny's day and a little bit before had grown and developed to begin to incorporate more keyboards. Some had 4 keyboards or manuals like we have now, some even more. And so what de Grigny is doing is he's going to show off what they can now do with organs in the dialogue section by writing little echoes. So when you see my hands on the next to top keyboard, and especially the very top one, those are the somewhat recent additions to the organ building world that the French had at their disposal. Again, if you were in England, Spain, Italy at the time, you would not have found organs that could do that. A little bit you would in Germany and the Netherlands, but they didn't function in this way. They used them for other purposes. So this is a French specialty, these little echo bits that you will hear, and this going back and forth between the different sounds of the keyboards. So enjoy these movements from the French Baroque by Nicolas de Grigny. There are two things that I want to point out about the music that you just heard. The first is that it was very highly ornamented. You heard lots of little trills and that kind of thing on notes. The French loved that. They had their own system of doing that, like their organs, was not like anybody else. And that is a way of expressing themselves in music. Some of the ornamentation you heard was in the score. Some of it was my own choosing based on my knowledge of the style, which is how they did it and how they would have wanted it to have been performed. You will not hear Baroque ornamentation in any of the other pieces. However, the second thing that you heard, besides all that ornamentation, is a lot of dissonance and resolution. In the Baroque era, I personally would say, if we want to really zoom out, the French really liked their dissonance and resolution. Lots of really heart-wrenching harmonies or very dramatic harmonies. And if you fast forward a few generations, we heard that with Messiaen, didn't we? And we're going to hear that with Dupré at the end of this program. So this being essentially a French program, we get to see how things develop and how, in around 1700, we had an aspect and how that develops then in the 20th century. So the next piece is going to be a soft lyrical piece that's going to show off the very beautiful flute sounds of the Notre-Dame Cathedral organ and the way that the acoustic carries these soaring melodies. George Baker is a living American composer and organist who also had a dual career as a dermatologist. I'm so glad that there are people who are that smart on earth that they can do all of those things. He studied extensively in France, writes a lot of organ music, often in a French style, and that is very much what his piece is on our program today. So this is a way in which we're marrying the United States and France, an American composer, but very much in a French style, including lots of French harmonies like you might have in the early 20th century. This is based on a hymn that you will recognize. And this is not why I'm playing the piece, although who doesn't like a little Christmas in July? I'm playing the piece for the other reasons. But it is based on Away in a Manger. And actually, we have two melodies for Away in a Manger, actually, and you will hear both of them. You'll hear one at the beginning, and then you'll hear the second one combined with the first one at the end. And then if you listen carefully at the very, very end, you will hear just a few notes of another Christmas carol that I know you will recognize. George Baker treats these melodies in a very French way. So you will hear the melody as it normally is, but you will also hear it in augmentation. He changes a note, then he changes another note, and then he changes another note, and then we move to a different key. This is a way of him making this his own and doing his own thing with this existing melody. So listen for how the melody develops and how he uses it to push the music forward and take us to different sections. Again, lots of warm, lush sounds here from the organ, as we also have here at Christ Church Cranbrook, so I hope you enjoy it. So we will end the program now with a piece by French composer Marcel Dupré, a huge figure in the organ world in his time, both as a teacher and as a performer. He toured the United States a number of times, and in the early 1920s, during one of his tours, he performed with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and then after intermission, he was going to improvise an entire 4-movement symphony as an organ solo piece. He was given melodies during the intermission for each of the movements, and they all turned out to be hymns, 3 of them Gregorian chants, and the other Adeste Fidelis, or O Come All Ye Faithful. And so Dupré was deeply inspired, based on what he wrote, to improvise a piece called the Symphonie Passion. So I'm going to play for you a movement from this called The World Awaiting the Savior. And this, again, is going to match the organ and the acoustic really well. You'll hear lots of repeated chords, which in that space and in that acoustic is a really extraordinary effect. This piece is about the world being in turmoil and then a prayer for deliverance. So in the very beginning, you will hear these repeated chords and a constantly changing time meter. It is intentionally supposed to feel like all is not well. This is depicting the world in turmoil, which is not a hard thing for us to picture right now, is it? And you'll hear it come to this sort of abrupt end after a crescendo, and then you'll hear the melody that Dupré was given, which is actually hymn number 85 in our hymnal in the pews. If you want to have a look, it's a Gregorian chant hymn for Christmas, originally appointed for evening prayer for Christmas. It's my favorite of the chant hymns for Vespers. And you'll hear this on a stop that sounds like an oboe in a very serene texture. And this is meant to be the prayer for deliverance from all this turmoil and unrest that surrounds us. So those are the 2 ideas, and they basically duke it out in this piece. A few more times it has a big crescendo and it abruptly ends, and we're back to the chaos. And ultimately, this second theme, the chant hymn, surrounds the theme of the world in turmoil and ultimately wins, but not without a fight, even until the very, very bitter end. So I am viewing this piece in a particular way. And this is partly because, again, we're bringing people together through music, but also the Notre-Dame Cathedral is one of the truly great houses of worship and prayer in the world. And I have asked them to say this in the introductory comments before the recital next week, which I gave them, and that is that I am viewing this piece as a prayer for peace in the world. So I, as the performer, want to, through music, make this a kind of musical prayer for peace at the great Notre-Dame Cathedral. So for me, both as a musician and a person of faith, that will be an incredibly meaningful moment. For me, I hope it will be answered, and so I want to say that is a big part of why I have programmed this piece and how I view it at the end. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm just so touched by your interest. Thank you for those joining us online. And here is our grand finale.